Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Wednesday, December 10th. Your reader for this hour is Claudia. Trump's power likely to expand. High Court may allow agency heads to be fired. The Supreme Court appears likely to agree with President Donald Trump that he can fire at will the heads of some independent agencies, hearing arguments on December 8th in a case that could redefine how more than a dozen agencies operate and shift power from Congress to the president. The agencies were set up by Congress to be led by politically balanced boards of experts, serving staggered fixed terms. But Trump argues presidential control will make agencies like the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and the Federal Election Commission more accountable to voters who elect presidents. The real-world consequences here are human beings exercising enormous governmental authority with a great deal of control over individuals and small and large businesses who ultimately do not answer to the president, Solicitor General John Sauer told the justices during nearly 2.5 hours of oral arguments. That's a power vacuum. A lawyer for Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, an FTC commissioner fired by Trump, countered that independent agencies have been part of the nation's governing structure since 1790. Any abstract theory that would wipe away so much history and precedent should be a non-starter, attorney Amit Agarwal argued. Conservative justices sympathetic. But the court's conservative supermajority seemed more sympathetic to the Trump administration's position. Most seemed to agree that the president should be able to remove leaders from at least some agencies and pushed only on how far that could go. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, for example, stressed early that he views the Federal Reserve differently. By contrast, the court's 3 liberal justices tried to raise the alarm about the potential consequences of letting presidents control agencies that Congress tried to insulate from political interference. The result of what you want is that the president is going to have massive, unchecked, uncontrolled power. Justice Elena Kagan said, not only to do traditional execution, but to make law through legislative and adjudicative frameworks. In response, Justice Samuel Alito gave Sauer the chance to argue that the results won't be disastrous. In fact, our entire government will move towards accountability, Sauer agreed, but Agarwal said a president could just on a whim decide tomorrow that everything the agency has been doing is wrong. Trump wants Supreme Court to overturn a 90-year-old precedent. Trump wants the court to overturn a 1935 decision limiting a president's ability to remove leaders of multi-member administrative agencies, a decision the court has been chipping away at since 2010. Under the unitary executive theory that conservatives have advanced for years, the Constitution gives presidents complete control over executive functions, which must include the power to remove commission members. In 1935, however, the Supreme Court said the FTC's duties were neither political nor executive, but predominantly quasi-judicial and quasi-legislative. The Department of Justice argues that even if that was a correct interpretation of the FTC in 1935, which it disputes, it no longer is. It was grievously wrong when decided, Sauer told the justices. He had a receptive audience. Chief Justice John Roberts called that 1935 decision, Humphrey's Executor versus United States, a dried husk of whatever people used to think it was, because it has nothing to do with what the FTC looks like today. But Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the court's most senior liberal justice, asked Sauer if the court had ever overturned such a long-standing precedent with a major impact on how the government operates. You're asking us to destroy the structure of government and to take away from Congress its ability to protect its idea that a government is better structured with some agencies that are independent, she said. Expert predicts court will overturn Humphrey's executor. Kevin King, a partner at Covington and Burling law firm who focuses on appellate and administrative and constitutional law matters, expects the court to overrule, not just further curtail, Humphrey's executor. That would mean Trump could remove heads of the FTC and of similar agencies, but King said Kagan's probing about the potentially far-reaching consequences on other agencies could make a difference when the justices meet privately to discuss the case. Even if Justice Kagan is not on the winning side of the vote here, he said, she nevertheless is influencing the court's reasoning, and her questions may lead some of her colleagues to take a more cautious and narrow approach here. Trump declared all federal agencies are under his control. After taking office, Trump declared that all federal agencies are under his control. The days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over, the president said in a March address to Congress. That same month, Trump fired the 2 Democratic members of the 5-member Federal Trade Commission board, Slaughter and Alvaro Bedoya. The FTC enforces a variety of antitrust and consumer protection laws affecting virtually every area of commerce. He's already removed Democratic members of 2 federal labor boards and would later fire the 3 Democrats on the CPSC. The Supreme Court allowed the firings to proceed while it decides whether Congress had the ability to limit the reasons regulators could be removed to inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Federal Reserve case pending. One question hanging over the case is whether the court will treat the Federal Reserve Board of Governors differently, as the justices suggested they might earlier this year when issuing a temporary ruling about firing Labor Commission members without cause. And the court did not allow Trump to immediately fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, deciding instead to hear arguments in January on his claim that he has just cause to remove her. Slaughter's and Cook's cases are among at least 4 the justices are deciding in the coming months that test Trump's expansive view of presidential authority. The court is also weighing whether Trump can impose sweeping tariffs on imports, even though the Constitution gives Congress the power to raise revenue. And the court will decide if Trump's interpretation of the Constitution means he can deny citizenship to some babies born in the United States. A decision in Trump versus Slaughter is expected by the end of June. Usha Vance talks holiday decor and traditions. 5-year-old Vivek Vance asked for a really skinny tree on an upstairs floor of the vice presidential residence, and his parents, Usha and JD, gave him his minimalist holiday wish for the most part. Usha says their son favored a tree that leaned and had bare spots, but the Vances came to a family compromise. It's kind of in that vein, Usha tells USA Today, but a little bit less sad than some of the ones he wanted. Of course, there are 3 grander trees on the ground floor of the house where guests can see them, but for the family quarters, there's the Charlie Brown-style Christmas tree. And so goes the holiday decision making at the Vance's palatial Naval Observatory residence in Washington. As with any American family, there's give and take in the decorations. Usha Vance isn't used to showing off her holiday trimmings, but this year as second lady, she opens up her home and offers a tour of the first floor on a Monday morning, December 8th, after her husband and children have left for the day. J.D. Vance was the 3rd youngest vice president when he was sworn in, and the couple's children, Ewan age 8, Vivek 5, and Mirabelle age 3, are the youngest children of the vice president ever to live in the mansion. In the family's first Christmas at the Naval Observatory, which is decked out with garlands, ornaments, and bows. We're not normally intense tinsel and frosted trees people, but it's fun for this year, Usha Vance, age 39, says in an exclusive interview with USA Today. A large white tent out front where the family is entertaining this season features framed photos of some of the house's former residents, part of this year's Golden Noel theme, paying tribute to 50 years of Christmases at the vice presidential residence. Some of the images are from scrapbooks left behind by former VPs. Others are from the Library of Congress. The Mondales were the first vice presidential family to live in the 33-room Queen Anne home about 2.5 miles from the White House and near many of the capital city's embassies and ambassadors' residences. The first Christmas celebration at the residence came when Nelson Rockefeller was in office in 1975, and this year's theme is a throwback to both. Usha Vance says, "It's a little bit of a vintage Christmas," she adds. The display took months to plan. It began with mood boards and concepts. Then the construction involved artists and volunteers who put it all together while the family was out of the house over the summer, Vance says. In the ground floor area open to party and dinner guests, 3 trees from Evergreen Acres in Pennsylvania, the runners-up in this year's National Christmas Tree Association contest, dot the sunroom, living room, and dining room, making the residence home. The Vance family has lived in the residence in Northwest Washington since the day after the president's inauguration on January 20th. In their spare time, they spent the first 10 months turning the house into a home. Above the fireplace in the dining room, a painting commissioned by the Delaware-based artist Allison Cosmos hangs on the wall. It features a blue jay, a nod to the Second Lady. There's also a ring-necked pheasant and a monarch butterfly, a favorite of their son Vivek's. And there's a California quail, a symbol of strong family bonds. There's a Rothko on loan from the Smithsonian. The couple built a treehouse for their children. Usha Vance says the play area has been insulated in a way that would allow it to be repurposed for adults as a workspace. They've built a storage shed that resembles the house. The family uses it for bikes and family woodworking, she says. Inside, they've added a pantry for storing snacks and lunchbox supplies. We never actually saw it before arriving, and we didn't really have a sense of what it would look like, but there are obvious safety considerations for the children, she says. There's a pool outside, so we wanted to make sure that it was set up in a way where the kids couldn't just run out and fall in. The Vances sold their residence in the Delray neighborhood of Alexandria, Virginia, where they lived while J.D. Vance was a U.S. Senator representing Ohio. They still own a house in Cincinnati, which they sometimes visit. In Washington, the 12-acre compound set back from the road on roughly 72 acres is their primary residence for now, and Usha says they're still putting the finishing touches on decorations such as stockings in their living space. A tree that they cut down as a family in Lexington, Kentucky, graces the family's quarters per Vivek's wishes. The family does not plan to spend Christmas Day on the property, she says. They typically visit her parents, sister, and brother-in-law in Southern California. Thanksgiving is usually spent with her husband's family in Ohio. Usha is the first Indian-American Second Lady and was raised Hindu, but she said in the interview that she always celebrated Christmas and exchanged gifts with her family. She says it was important to her father that they spend time in this season thinking about the religious significance of the holiday. We read from the Bible and think about the Christmas story, or we would do things that emphasize the spirit of giving and service to other people, like volunteer, she says. It wasn't like a purely secular experience of Christmas, but it also wasn't our religious tradition. Her husband is a Christian who converted to Catholicism in 2019 after they were already married. She has said she does not plan to convert. Their oldest son, Ewan, chose to be baptized in 2024. That was also the year he decided he no longer believed in Santa. He told his class that St. Nick isn't real, Usha says, but it went all right because the other kids who were still Santa believers basically argued him down, so it didn't really have the effect that he intended, the Second Lady says. Their 5-year-old Vivek has basically figured it out because their eldest has a big mouth, she says. Their 3-year-old Mirabelle is still pretty oblivious. She's still in on it. Until recently, her children's favorite holiday film was The Nightmare Before Christmas by Tim Burton. They were a little bit obsessed with that, she says, calling the film that bridges Halloween and Christmas a little bit deranged. They've since moved on to The Grinch, the original version. She says she hasn't seen the Jim Carrey one. It's their favorite, probably because it's my favorite, she says. The children are increasingly into ice skating, Usha says, and are taking lessons at the rink on the National Mall. Vivek likes the holiday opera, and they plan to go again. We have to sprinkle them in between all the parties and official engagements, she says. The Second Lady says she's holding 9 receptions the week of December 8th alone, including one President Donald Trump planned to attend. She hosted 3 or 4 parties in the previous week. She has lost count. Trump set to sign order on federal AI rules. President seeks one rule book for tech. President Donald Trump will sign an executive order this week establishing a federal framework around artificial intelligence, a move aimed at preempting states from imposing their own laws on the mega-popular technology. There must be only one rule book if we are going to continue to lead in AI, Trump wrote on Truth Social on December 8th. We are beating all countries at this point in the race, but that won't last long if we are going to have 50 states, many of them bad actors, involved in rules and the approval process. However, this isn't the first time Trump has expressed an interest in creating a federal rule book. We must have one federal standard instead of a patchwork of 50 state regulatory regimes, he told on Truth Social November 18th. Artificial intelligence covers a massive amount of technology, from taking on tasks that used to require a human's touch to creating the latest viral trends and more. Lawmakers, activists, and others repeatedly have sounded alarms over deepfakes and many other AI applications. All 50 states, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Washington, D.C. have introduced a variety of AI-focused legislation this year. At least 38 states have also adopted around 100 AI measures in 2025, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. It's also not clear how many lawmakers will support the president's latest push. When Trump signed his tax and spending bill into law on July 4th, a previously proposed 10-year federal ban on state and local AI had already been stripped from it. Days before, the Senate voted 99-1 in favor of an amendment co-sponsored by Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat from Washington, and Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican from Tennessee, to remove a 10-year moratorium on state AI regulations from the Republican-backed legislation, which GOP leaders dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill. Cantwell argued at the time that the Senate can't just run over good state consumer protection laws. States can fight robocalls, deepfakes, and provide safe autonomous vehicle laws, she said in July. This also allows us to work together nationally to provide a new federal framework on artificial intelligence that accelerates U.S. leadership in AI while still protecting consumers. South Carolina State Representative Brandon Guffey told nonprofit consumer advocacy organization Public Citizen that it makes zero sense to remove the state's ability to protect citizens. The group has long monitored federal and private sector efforts to ditch state-level AI regulations. 2 years ago, no one would have thought an AI chatbot would coach kids to take their lives. We sit here today with that knowledge, yet those that took an oath to defend us are considering a moratorium on any AI regulations regardless of harm, said Guffey, who serves on the South Carolina House of Representatives Committee on AI, according to a Public Citizen news release. This is done in the interest of the world's richest companies and at the expense of our children. Still, Trump argued in his December 8th post that letting each state come up with its own regulations would be detrimental to the development of AI technology. AI will be destroyed in its infancy, he wrote in his Truth Social post. You can't expect a company to get 50 approvals every time they want to do something. That will never work. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour. Lots of people are digging dumpster diving, but is it legal? On social media, the scene plays out again and again, people plunging into dumpsters and finding discarded treasures like luxury purses, video games, and brand new makeup kits. In recent years, the once shamed practice of dumpster diving has surged in popularity. Videos collectively have racked up billions of views on TikTok and led to scrutiny of the waste from corporations. A clip by Ella Rose, who goes by at Glamour Dive, shows her pulling bags of perfumes and fake eyelashes from a dumpster behind an Ulta beauty store. There's not much in here that's not destroyed, she says in the video, which has nearly 46 million views on TikTok alone. But the increased interest has also raised a central question. Is it legal to dumpster dive? Though a decades-old Supreme Court decision indirectly permits dumpster diving on public property, the practice could lead to fines and criminal charges. That's because many cities and local governments have ordinances in place banning or limiting the practice. Rules vary city and county, but generally it is illegal to sift through dumpsters on private property, which is where most large dumpsters are located, especially those filled up by prominent retailers. Practically speaking, dumpster diving is almost always illegal, said Jeff Farrell, a professor emeritus at Texas Christian University, who has written 2 books on scavenging. The rules vary widely. In 1988, the Supreme Court ruled that police can legally search discarded garbage without a search warrant. Though the case centered on law enforcement, it was a major win for the dumpster divers because it made garbage in a public space fair game. But over the decades, local rules and ordinances have begun to clamp down. Farrell noted that many locals have argued that once trash is in a dumpster, it belongs to the city's waste management system. In Wood River, Illinois, for example, an ordinance introduced in 2025 bans dumpster diving with fines ranging from $100 to $750. Similar restrictions are in place in Sacramento, California, and Cleveland. In Montgomery, Alabama, an ordinance restricting dumpster diving allows it only between sunrise and sunset. Other possible penalties include misdemeanor charges such as trespassing, littering, on property damage. When diving equals trespassing. If a dumpster is behind a fence or is fitted with a sign warning against dumpster diving, it's wise to stay away, longtime divers say. It now has become more common for retailers and grocery stores to lock up their dumpsters, blocking them from the public. Divers can run into trouble when they climb over a lock or decide to break into a trash bin. Farrell, who has been searching through trash bins for more than 50 years, noted that it's not often clear whether a dumpster is on private property. Therefore, he said, there's always the risk involved in scavenging, though he has never faced any serious consequences for it apart from an occasional fine. I've had police say, we don't really care, but we had to respond to the call, Farrell said. Good food just thrown away. Robin Greenfield has sifted through about 3,000 dumpsters across 25 states over the past decade. The environmental activist says he avoids trash bins that are locked and clearly marked with trespassing warnings. I've never had a ticket or a written warning, Greenfield, age 39, told USA Today. In recent years, dumpster diving has gained popularity thanks to social media and an activist movement condemning the waste of corporate retailers and grocery stores. Greenfield first became involved in food activism when, during a coast-to-coast bike ride in 2013, he discovered large amounts of edible food sitting in grocery store dumpsters, he said. I couldn't believe how much perfectly good food was being thrown away. The next year, he biked from the Mississippi River to New York City, eating food he found exclusively in dumpsters to raise awareness about food waste. He has since hosted food drives, giving any large amounts of non-perishable goods like canned beans, soup and vegetables, as well as granola bars and cereal he pulled from trash bins. Farrell, who no longer teaches sociology full-time, spends much of his days dumpster diving. A few times a month, he brings carloads of clothes to homeless shelters, tools to community gardens, and pencils and pens to a nonprofit that supports local teachers. It's his mission, he said, to keep goods out of the waste stream and get them back into use. Every 100 pounds I pull out of the dumpster doesn't go to the landfill, and every sweater I give to someone in need means one less sweater they've got to buy. He said it's good for everybody. The new virility of dumpster diving has also sparked a backlash against retailers, leading some to make changes. After a clip went viral of a scavenger finding Coach bags that were supposedly slashed by employees, the luxury brand vowed to stop destroying in-house returns of damaged and unsaleable goods and find ways to reuse them. Michigan dads who's over wrongful conviction. They did me wrong. Behind prison walls, they called him Baby Killer. It was a torturous nickname for Michael Griffin, who was serving a life sentence for the death of his infant daughter, a crime he adamantly denies. He said she fell from a baby swing inside their home in Flint, Michigan, and died the next day from a failed surgery. But the police, he said, were hell-bent on blaming him for her death, accusing him of abusing her and trying to bully a confession out of him. Tell us what you did or the doctors won't help your daughter. Griffin recalled the police telling him during a 3-hour-long interrogation as his daughter clung to life. He described it as a futile back and forth. I'm telling you the truth. No, you're not. She fell out of her swing. No, she didn't. They kept telling me I was lying, recalled Griffin, who at 19 would get charged, convicted, and sent to prison, where the baby killer taunts would tear his guts out for years, triggering fights with those who dared utter it. I had to keep telling myself I didn't do it, even if the truth never came out, he said in a recent interview with the Detroit Free Press, part of the USA Today network. But the truth did eventually come out, Griffin said. In 2023, he was exonerated with the help of the Michigan Innocence Clinic and attorney Mike Morse. He is now suing to hold those accountable for, as he puts it, framing him for a crime he never committed and robbing him of 14 years of his life. Wrongful prosecution suit filed. In a wrongful prosecution lawsuit unfolding in U.S. District Court, Griffin alleges that his daughter's death was caused by a failed surgical procedure and that police, doctors, and forensic officials conspired to transform a tragic household accident into a fabricated homicide. Specifically, the suit alleges investigators and medical personnel built a false narrative of child abuse, coerced a confession, and then falsified police and medical reports and altered autopsy findings to match their story. When I was locked up, I kept telling myself, I know they did me wrong, Griffin said, but I didn't think it could be proven. Griffin's lawsuit is against Flint, Genesee County, 2 Flint police officers, 3 doctors, 3 officials, with the medical examiner's office and the Hurley Medical Center, where his daughter was taken for treatment. Through multiple lawyers and agency officials, all declined comment for this article. Among the lawsuit's allegations, there were no physical evidence of blunt force trauma, yet the police and doctors pushed this theory, and a medical examiner listed it as cause of death on the autopsy report, which also noted the existence of a prior head injury, a bruise on the baby's face, and the occurrence of an unsuccessful craniotomy. Yet without any evidence that the injuries were caused by the dad, as opposed to the craniotomy, the medical examiner determined that cause of death was blunt force injury of the head, and the manner of death was homicide. In the middle of Griffin's trial, the autopsy report was changed after a doctor testified that no evidence existed to support a finding of blunt force trauma. A medical examiner then sent the prosecution an updated autopsy report, changing the cause of death to abuse of head injury. A doctor testified that this phrase is used when there is no way to determine how injuries occur and admitted that it was used to reflect that the doctors did not know what happened to Nevaeh. A doctor had discovered a prior head injury in the baby, yet the jury was never informed about how her fall could have re-injured it. As it turned out, a CT scan showed a new brain bleed had developed, which triggered the need for the surgery that ultimately failed. The police report stated that Griffin's interrogation was videotaped. The prosecutor said the same at trial, yet the videotape has never been produced. Griffin's lawyers filed a Freedom of Information Act request for it, but the city of Flint said the video didn't exist. Griffin was arrested without a warrant. A medical examiner testified that she performed an autopsy on the child at 9 a.m., but the baby was in surgery at that time and was not pronounced dead until 1:10 p.m. There were desperate measures taken here to ensure that Michael would be blamed for the death of his daughter, said attorney Adam Akil, who was representing Griffin in the lawsuit. He noted the prosecution showed a shaken baby video to the jury when there was no evidence supporting this theory. It's them pushing this false narrative to pin it on the dad, Akil said, when they all admit that they had no facts to support that it was caused by him. Grieving parent to murder suspect. According to court records, trial testimony, interviews with lawyers, and Griffin, these are the events that unfolded in the fall of 2009. On September 30th, 2009, Griffin was home with his daughter while the baby's mom walked to a corner market at about 5 p.m. Both parents were just 19, living in a 2-story apartment in Flint with baby Nevaeh, whose dad had placed her in a motorized infant swing upstairs while her mom was out. He secured her with the attached tray that latched across her lap. He then went downstairs and played video games when eventually he heard a loud thump. He said he thought it might be the neighbors, but when he went upstairs, he said he found the baby face down on the hardwood floor. I panicked and picked her up, Griffin recalled. I remembered this clear as day. As soon as I picked her up, her head went limp on my shoulder. She wasn't crying. Griffin said he set her on the bed when he heard a knock at the door. It was Nevaeh's mom. He ran downstairs with the baby and opened the door. The mom grabbed the baby, who had stopped breathing, ran out the door and yelled for help. An apartment security guard performed CPR on the baby, and it resuscitated her before the ambulance took her to Hurley Medical Center. When Nevaeh got to the hospital, she had a bruise under her right eye and no other external injuries. But the parents would learn overnight that her brain had swollen and she would need surgery. A CT scan had revealed a tiny and thin bleed on the left side of Nevaeh's brain, and a cystic hygroma or benign tumor was discovered on the right side. This meant that a prior injury had occurred and healed, but was dangerously susceptible to re-injury, the lawsuit states. After After discovering the cystic hygroma, hospital officials contacted Child Protective Services and the Flint police, who would interrogate both parents. Mom went first, telling police that she and Griffin had a good relationship, that he treated her and the baby well, and that she had no reason to believe he would harm their child. Mom also told the officers that Nevaeh had a tendency to kick up the tray and pull herself up and out of her swing. The police, though, reportedly criticized the mom for trusting the dad, telling her that the doctors did not believe Griffin's story, and neither did they. 15 years later, Nevaeh's mom, who said she initially didn't want to believe Griffin could have hurt their child, says after years of researching the case and rethinking the details, the medical testimony, and Griffin's story, she doesn't believe Griffin is telling the truth. And though she testified for the prosecution at his trial, at times providing favorable testimony for the dad, she said she believes Griffin did something that caused her child's death and is hiding something. Mom's certain something happened. For 36-year-old Alicia Patton, Nevaeh's mom, the pain, sadness, and trauma of losing a child has never gone away. Though grateful for the experience to become a mom again, she now has a 10-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. She still grieves Nevaeh every day, she said, and the memory of what happened still haunts her. Something happened at the house that caused her to go to the hospital, and he's not taking accountability for, Patton told the Free Press. That hospital visit was especially traumatic for Patton, who also lost her father that day. He had come to the hospital to be with her after learning about Nevaeh when he died suddenly of a health issue inside his car in the parking lot just 10 minutes after Nevaeh died. He didn't want her to be alone. That's what I tell myself to keep going, Patton said. You're listening to a reading of articles on today's issue of USA Today. On the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, the time is 30 minutes after the hour. We are continuing with our article on the exoneration of Michael Griffin. With back-to-back tragedies to contend with, Patton would get hit with another major event. In just a matter of days, her baby's father would be charged with murder. I didn't want to believe it, said Patton, but as time passed, she said, she came to a conclusion. I was faced with the reality that he's the reason behind her being deceased, said Patton, who cut off all ties with Griffin shortly after Nevaeh's death. Patton said she didn't believe Griffin. She fell out of the swing explanation, and it just didn't make sense. It never did make sense. Patton, now a certified nursing assistant, said she also didn't believe Nevaeh died from a failed surgery, maintaining it was Griffin who caused her to be in the hospital in the first place. If whatever happened at the house hadn't happened, then the doctors would not have had to try to find the fluid off her brain, Patton said. I asked them to do what they could to try and save her, and they did the best they could do. All I want is the truth. When Griffin was exonerated, Patton said she was blindsided. I went into a dark hole. I wasn't expecting it. Patton said later, adding, everybody is saying he deserves a second chance. I feel like leave well enough alone. As for second chances, Patton said, I'm not God. I can't say what nobody deserves, but I would be more comfortable if he were in prison. Justice was served before he got out. As for Griffin's lawsuit, she said, he's going for money. All I want is the truth. Griffin, police coerced confession. Griffin maintains he has been truthful from the start and that he was railroaded by police when they first took him in for questioning. According to Griffin trial transcripts and court records, here's what's happened. At the state of the interrogation, the officers reportedly told Griffin that both they and the doctors believed he had intentionally abused his daughter and caused her injuries. Griffin protested, but the officers wouldn't let up, allegedly telling him that unless he confessed to harming her, the doctors wouldn't be able to treat her. Griffin told the officers that a couple of weeks earlier, Nevaeh had fallen on the metal post of the swing and suggested that this could have happened again, records show. But the officers would not relent. They wanted more, telling him his daughter would die because he wasn't man enough to tell the truth, and that they suspected he lost his temper with the mom and took it out on the baby. Griffin continued to deny hurting his child, but the questioning continued. After accusing Griffin of not wanting to help his daughter, reports show, they told him he could leave, but threatened that he would likely not be able to see Nevaeh for at least 18 months and that parental termination proceedings were imminent. Desperate and afraid, Griffin caved. Given the coercive pressure being placed on Griffin, and in a desperate attempt to satisfy the officer's relentless demands, Griffin stated that he sometimes taps Nevaeh on the back of the head, but he never does it hard, and he plays with her that way, the suit states, adding that the dad also told the officers he sometimes throws her up and down, but also just to play with her, and that he has never and would never hurt her. At 1:10 p.m. on October 1st, 7 hours after his interrogation, his daughter was pronounced dead. 5 days later, Griffin was charged with felony murder and first-degree child abuse. At trial, he took the stand in his own defense, but he was unable to convince a jury he was innocent. Patton testifies at trial. During trial, jurors also heard from Patton, whose testimony largely focused on her relationship with Griffin, his parenting skills, and the events that transpired the night of September 30th, 2009. She was never asked at trial whether she believed Griffin's explanation for how their daughter got hurt. During her testimony, Patton said she never had any concerns about Griffin appropriately caring for their daughter, that she never saw him lose his patience with her, that he was her primary caretaker while she attended a work program, and that the two did not have disagreements about how he cared for her. She also pushed back on the prosecution's claims that she nodded her head yes when a medical examiner investigator asked her whether she believed Griffin had abused their daughter. She testified she did not remember that. Did he love her? The defense asked her on cross-examination. Yes, she answered. Patton also testified that the baby once rolled off the sofa while in Dad's care. She took the baby to the hospital out of caution, she said, but there were no injuries. She also testified that he once broke a window in their home after arguing, but that the dispute was not about the baby. At the hospital on September 30th of 2009, Patton testified Griffin would tell her that the baby fell from the swing and that he found her on the floor when he went upstairs to change her diaper. She said they waited for about 2 hours in the hospital waiting room, but got no answers about the condition of their child. At that point, she said 2 police officers showed up and took her to the police station for questioning. Patton did not testify about the interrogation, but said she went back to the hospital after questioning and eventually learned that her daughter would need surgery. 5 hours later, the doctors would give her the gut-wrenching news Nevaeh didn't make it. Meanwhile, the police would begin building a case against Griffin using the illegally elicited statements he made during his interrogation against him, lawsuit states. Those same statements would later be used to persuade a jury to convict him. The prosecution also used the statements to persuade the Court of Appeals to uphold his conviction. It wasn't until the Michigan Innocence Clinic and prominent plaintiff attorney Mike Morse intervened that he was exonerated. Appointed attorney, a disaster. In securing Griffin's freedom, the Michigan Innocence Clinic and Morse argued that Griffin had an ineffective lawyer. There are lots of causes of wrongful convictions, but most of these cases have one thing in common: bad or overworked lawyers or public defenders, and this is one of the main reasons Mr. Griffin was wrongfully convicted, Morse said during a 2023 news conference when Griffin was released. His court-appointed attorney was a disaster. He called no expert witnesses, despite the fact that the state called 7. According to Griffin, it was Morse who ultimately secured his release by bringing in doctors who explained to the court how the baby's death likely occurred. Morse, who had never before handled a criminal case and took this one pro bono, also argued that the scientific consensus around shortfall and other head injuries had evolved since 2010, evidence that was not readily available when Griffin was convicted. Using these arguments, Morse persuaded the county circuit court judge to vacate Griffin's convictions in March 2023, release him on bond, and order a new trial, but there was no retrial. After reevaluating the case, the county prosecutor's office opted not to retry it, dropped all charges, and dismissed the case on September 13, 2023. When asked to explain this decision, Assistant Prosecutor John Pothbury declined comment, citing pending litigation. A fresh start, a wife, a new baby. Griffin, who now runs a cleaning business, has embraced his freedom with new hope and purpose. He married a woman he met years ago while he was in prison, and the two now have a 1-year-old boy named Nash. He looks just like his sister, said Griffin, noting his son makes him smile again, and a lot of the anger is gone. I ended up letting it go, Griffin said. I had to let go of all the emotions. Griffin received $435,000 from the state for the years he spent in prison. It was supposed to be $696,000 or $50,000 for every year he was in prison. He said he didn't get the entire amount because authorities said his daughter had been hurt before, and so they decided against giving him the full amount. It didn't make sense to Griffin, who maintains he never harmed Nevaeh. But he said he's moving on from that too, shifting his focus to his lawsuit. Losing a child was hard enough, he said, but then again, being blamed for her death was another matter. I wish nobody would ever go through this, said Griffin. I dealt with a lot of pain. And now he wants the civil justice system to hold the police, doctors, medical examiners, and others responsible. It took more than a year for Griffin to pursue a lawsuit, he said. He had an epiphany. I woke up my wife. I said, if I'm sitting here, who is responsible for killing my daughter? Griffin recalled, noting he has never received an apology for his ordeal. Nothing was ever said, not an I'm sorry. They locked me up for it and said I've done it. But now that I'm out, he added, his intent on answering this question. Who did it? Judge orders evidence released in Ghislaine Maxwell's case. Ruling also includes protection for victims. A federal judge ordered the release of records about the late accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein from the case against his aide, Ghislaine Maxwell, based on the law Congress approved to reveal more documents from the investigation. U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmayer in New York ordered the release of grand jury transcripts and exhibits from the case against Maxwell, who is serving 20 years in prison for conspiring with Epstein. Engelmayer also ordered the release of evidence that was shared in the case between the prosecution and defense before Maxwell's 2021 trial. But Engelmayer ordered the Department of Justice to put in place a mechanism to protect victims from inadvertent release of evidence that would identify them or invade their privacy. Before the new law, which set a deadline of December 19th for the DOJ to release more records about the case, federal judges had refused to release grand jury transcripts because of the traditional confidentiality applied to those proceedings. But Epstein's victims fought for years to release more information about the case to determine whether his rich and powerful acquaintances had previously discouraged his investigation or helped with his alleged trafficking. Engelmayer noted the legislation specifically mentions Maxwell and releasing grand jury evidence, which is held by the DOJ. That language is strikingly broad. Engelmayer wrote, Congress's decision not to exclude grand jury materials, despite knowledge as to their existence, while expressly excluding other categories of materials such as classified information, indicates that the Act covers grand jury materials. The order was similar to another one on December 5th by a federal judge in Florida. U.S. District Judge Rodney Smith ordered the release of grand jury transcripts from the abandoned investigation of Epstein in 2005 to 2007. Epstein died by suicide in 2019 while awaiting trial, but dozens of Epstein's victims are mentioned in indictments, and some legal experts have said there could be 1,000 victims. On December 8th, the DOJ wrote that a consortium of victims had unfairly accused it of releasing personally identifiable information about victims. The department said the information had previously been released publicly, but that from this point forward it would redact victim names even where earlier publicly identified. Engelmayer wrote about 2 other requests for confidentiality. The judge received a letter on behalf of a John Doe arguing that his identity should be redacted because it would lead to the public identifying of one of Epstein's victims. Another letter from lawyer Neil Binder seeks the redaction of his clients' names. High-profile acquaintances of Epstein include President Donald Trump, former President Bill Clinton, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who lost his title over the scandal. Trump and others have denied wrongdoing. Trump supported releasing the files during the 2024 presidential campaign, but his DOJ on July 7th released a memo saying no further disclosure of the documents was needed after teasing a truckload of Epstein files in March. It spurred a rare moment of discord within the Republican Party and a movement to force a vote on the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Though Trump repeatedly called the issue a hoax, he made a stunning reversal in supporting the release of the files, and the bill was swiftly passed through the House, the Senate, and signed by Trump on November 19th. Fat cats may find help in weight loss drug trial. A San Francisco pharmaceutical company has started a clinical trial that uses implants to help cats lose weight, and the first feline already has received a dose. Calling the research Management of Overweight Cats with OKV-119. Meow 1. Okava Pharmaceuticals said the trial marks the world's first GLP-1 weight loss therapy for pets. The device, the OKV-119, is a GLP-1 implant, a small device inserted under the skin that can deliver doses of medication for up to 6 months, the company said in a news release on December 3rd. Feline obesity is one of the most common nutritional disorders among domestic cats, according to the Cornell University College of Veterinary Medicine. Among claims Okava Pharmaceuticals about the device is that it can improve cardiometabolic health in cats, or how the heart and blood vessels function, improve how the body processes energy, help fight growing ailments in cats such as diabetes, kidney disease, and obesity. Still, the device is still early in its testing, and researchers haven't shown how effectively it can help felines at this beginning stage. Implant is meant to make things easier. According to Okava Pharmaceuticals, the OKV-119 implant uses technology from another company, California-based Vivani Medical, to deliver medication to the cats. For cats that take a daily or weekly medication via injection or orally, it can often be hard to do so consistently. The implant can help avoid these challenges, Vivani Medical said in the news release. Okava Pharmaceuticals said the implant and its technology will ensure cats remain adherent for up to 6 months with a single implant administered. Michael Klotzman, Chief Executive Officer of Okava, said in the news release that fasting is one of the most widely accepted ways to improve cat health, but it's hard to stick to. OKV-119 is designed to mimic many of the physiological effects of fasting: improved insulin sensitivity, reduced fat mass, and more efficient energy metabolism without requiring significant changes in feeding routines or disrupting the human-animal bond that often centers around food, Klotzman said. The company said the findings will help shape future clinical development, including studies in dogs. Can I get this implant now? The implant at the center of the clinical trial is the first of its kind, so it's not available to the general public yet. USA Today has contacted Okava Pharmaceuticals to inquire about when the implant could become available for pet owners, whether the trial is still accepting participants, and more studies are planned. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Mamdani will face free speech challenge, balancing safety religion task for New York City mayor-elect. As Zohran Mamdani prepares to take office as New York City's mayor on January 1st, a First Amendment challenge awaits him. How does a leader of one of the nation's most diverse cities balance protecting free speech rights of protesters with freedom of religion rights of Jewish New Yorkers? The issue came to the forefront in late November as protests took place outside the Park East Synagogue, which was hosting an event by the nonprofit Nefesh B'Nefesh, which supports Jewish people in emigrating to Israel. Mamdani discouraged the language used, which reportedly included death to the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, and globalized the Intifada. But he simultaneously said these sacred spaces should not be used to promote activities in violation of international law, according to the New York Times. His spokesperson later told the outlet that Mamdani's comment referred to the settlements in the occupied West Bank where Nefesh B'Nefesh promotes Jewish people to emigrate. The Anti-Defamation League, which created a Mamdani monitor to follow developments in his administration, called the mayor-elect's comments deeply troubling in a November 20th X post. This is outrageous and deeply offensive and is rooted in a hateful ideology that Jews are the only people in the world who do not deserve the right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland, the Jewish anti-hate organization said. Mamdani followed the controversy with another statement to the New York Times on November 24th that steered clear of any criticism of the synagogue, saying, "We will protect New Yorkers' First Amendment rights while making clear that nothing can justify language calling for death to anyone. It is unacceptable, full stop." The New York Times also reported that Park East Synagogue Rabbi Arthur Schneider and his son Hampton Synagogue founder Rabbi Mark Schneider suggested that Mamdani supports legislation to ban protests directly outside of houses of worship. Democratic New York State Senator Liz Krueger expressed interest in potentially introducing a bill to that effect, according to the outlet. Mamdani's transition team did not respond to U.S. Today's request for comment. Though some Jewish leaders remained incensed by Mamdani's comments and wary of how the Jewish community will fare under his administration, other city leaders told USA Today they're hopeful that Mamdani will find the balance between upholding civil liberties for all while maintaining public safety. Optimism following Mamdani's amiable Trump meeting. The New York City Liberties Union said it follows City Hall's developments very closely. The organization, as it has done in the past, issued a civil rights agenda for New York's next mayor prior to the election and is in the process of tailoring it specifically for Mamdani's upcoming administration. The agenda said that the next mayor will be tasked with fighting the Trump administration's fascist attacks while crafting a city that is safe, welcoming, and affordable for all New Yorkers. It calls for the next mayor to defend New York's sanctuary city laws, strengthening policies for public schools to protect students and their families from immigration and customs enforcement, and invest in school libraries to fight right-wing book ban efforts, among other requests. The size and diversity of a place in New York City can bring particular challenges when it comes to protecting civil liberties. The mayor's office must avoid, for example, the appearance or the reality of promoting any or all religions, according to NYCLU Executive Director Donna Lieberman. And that can be tricky when it comes to social services or government functions. Many religiously affiliated organizations in the city offer social services, and the mayor's office currently has an Office of Faith-Based and Community Partnerships, but Lieberman emphasized that government funds can't be used to promote religion. She added, though, that there are many opportunities to expand civil rights protections while also maintaining order and safety, and was optimistic that Mamdani's skill at calming critics will help his administration strike that balance. One can hope that the mayor-elect who managed to engage President Trump in reasoned discourse can also engage New Yorkers of differing political viewpoints in reasoned discourse about difficult issues or deeply held and divisive issues, Lieberman said. Trump met with Mamdani at the White House on November 21st. The meeting had a different, more amiable tone than the jabs and criticisms the pair had exchanged during the campaign, which included Trump's false accusations about Mamdani's citizenship and threats to potentially arrest him if he impedes federal immigration efforts in New York. Mamdani also confronted Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, after then Columbia University student and pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil was detained in March. "Do you believe in the First Amendment, Tom Homan?" Mamdani shouted at Homan as security personnel held him back. Homan did not appear to respond to the confrontation at the time, but he later told Fox News he supports the First Amendment. Mamdani called the Trump visit a productive meeting rooted in their shared love of the nation's largest city, and Trump said the city was going to have, hopefully, a really great mayor in Mamdani. Israel-Palestine is most difficult, most divisive issue. Mamdani's election was a milestone, according to the Reverend Chloe Breyer of the Interfaith Center of New York, a secular nonprofit that works to overcome prejudice, violence, and misunderstanding. She referenced the uptick in Islamophobia following the 9/11, saying that the notion of a Muslim mayor at such a moment would have seemed far-fetched. "It's great testimony to our country, to New Yorkers," Breyer, an Episcopal priest in the Diocese of New York, said. Regardless of any policy differences people may have with Mamdani, the fact that it happened is a hopeful one, a really hopeful one for our country. At the same time, Mamdani was the target of Islamophobic attacks during the campaign. His opponent, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, questioned how Mamdani would handle another 9/11 in a radio interview and laughed when the host said he'd be cheering. CARE Action, an affiliate on the Council on American Islamic Relations, called Cuomo's comments deeply Islamophobic. CARE's New York chapter also said a report documenting online Islamophobic attacks against Mamdani showed that Islamophobia is not an isolated problem, but a systemic and organized campaign of dehumanization. Breyer called the Israel-Palestine conflict the single most difficult, most divisive issue in interfaith relations in the city. Though it long predates the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks on Israel, it was certainly taken to new heights in the past 2 years since Israel invaded Gaza, she said. Anti-Defamation League calls for Mamdani to speak out forcefully against anti-Semitism. It's Mamdani's response to that conflict and the domestic issues it's created that concerns the Anti-Defamation League, an organization that works to combat anti-Semitism and extremism and supports Israel as a Jewish state. The group condemned Mamdani's response to the Park East synagogue protests and told USA Today it hopes Mamdani uses his own First Amendment rights to speak out forcefully against anti-Semitism in all its forms, including anti-Semitic chants. We would hope that he and members of his administration can forcefully and unequivocally denounce anti-Semitism in all forms and without caveats, the spokesperson said. It said the goal of the Mamdani Monitor is to prevent the rise of such incidents through efforts to keep Mamdani's administration transparent and accountable. The organization did not yet have publicly available data from the New York City anti-Semitism tip line that launched in the wake of Mamdani's election. A spokesperson referred USA Today to its October report that described a sustained pattern of harassment, intimidation, and violence that threatens Jewish New Yorkers' sense of safety and belonging. USA Today's coverage of First Amendment issues is funded through a collaboration between the Freedom Forum and journalism funding partners. Funders do not provide editorial input. Americans have enough stuff. Give a gift that can't be bought. Opinion by Cameron Smith. Now that the Thanksgiving turkey leftovers have been polished off and most of us have realized that Christmas is less than a month away, the retail marketing hurricane has ramped up the pressure to find the perfect gift. My house full of boys has little trouble settling on a person we appreciate most, but we struggle with what to buy. The modern marketplace is willing to sell us just about anything but thoughtfulness. Thanksgiving affords my 5 boys and me the opportunity to reflect on the people we appreciate most. This year, like every year, we unanimously agree that one person makes our lives immeasurably better. Mom. We are, in fact, appreciative of a great number of people, but Mom keeps our home from developing into a dark cave that smells of dirty laundry and various proteins. The question that immediately follows, so what should we get Mom for Christmas? Right out of the gate, one boy mentioned cedar, wood, candle, apparently confusing candles with our affinity for grilling salmon. Honestly, my wife does like candles, but she has more than an ancient Italian monastery. Mom likes your boxers and t-shirts, another chimed in. Maybe we can get her some lady pajamas. Nothing lets you know that you live in a boy home, quite like a group of young men who have absolutely no idea what women wear at night. Remember when you bought her that nice broiler pan and she put it in the cabinet above the fridge? Asked another. Maybe you could just throw away the one she's using so she uses that one and our food is safer to eat. Asking the boys for Christmas ideas is like asking Congress for fiscal restraint. Interesting, but ultimately fruitless. All of us struggle because we are culturally conditioned to look for stuff. Global gift retailing industry is a nearly $500 billion market. The real comedy here, and the subject I want to chew on, is that I actually know the answer about what Mom wants. Years ago, I read Gary Chapman's The 5 Love Languages, so I know definitely that my wife's primary language is acts of service followed by quality time. I know that she's not alone in preference for non-material appreciation. Don't get me wrong, we buy lots of stuff. The global gift marketing industry is nearly $500 billion that grows annually, and Americans plan to spend an average of almost $900 per consumer on holiday gifts, decorations, food, and other key items this season. It's just that my wife and countless others like her couldn't be less interested in the noise of the consumer industry complex. My wife doesn't want another object to become clutter in our home. She wants to know that her sacrifices and daily efforts have been noticed. She wants to see her car detailed by us, the cabinets thoroughly cleaned, and for her boys to do their homework without argument. The data backs up the idea that the physical gift-giving love language is statistically one of the least popular. A 2025 survey by telehealth company Hims found that gifts ranked dead last as love language, cited by only 11% of respondents. The top 2 love languages, quality time and physical touch, don't have anything to do with stuff at all. This shift has been noticed across the entire market. Deloitte's holiday surveys have projected a steeper decline in consumer spending on gifts and experiences. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology even found that spending on experiences promotes more moment-to-moment happiness than spending on material items because they endure in people's memories. So for all the other husbands and fathers reading this while staring at a shopping cart full of brightly colored, entirely unnecessary items, stop. Reread the tea leaves. Your wife is likely not asking for a $100 snazzy brand scuba half-zip pullover. She's asking for your attention and your effort. She doesn't want to ask you and the kids to check the pockets before putting the laundry in. She wants you to know what needs doing and do it from a place of deep love, not obligation. She doesn't need another cedarwood candle. She needs 20 minutes of you sitting down next to her, helping her finish her puzzle, and being truly talking. Be present, be observant, and serve your loved one. Get an early start, put some thought into the doing, and maybe, just maybe, skip the kitchenware aisle. It will just wind up in the cabinet above the refrigerator anyway. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Wednesday, December 10th on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As of this year, our agency has broadcast more than 300,000 hours of radio readings. Volunteer radio readers read newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Reading's broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading broadcasts from studios at 1199 Harlem Road in suburban Buffalo. Please let others know about Radio Reading. It's your service. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Robert. Dodgers Roberts desires MLB salary cap. Orlando, Florida. Los Angeles Dodgers manager Dave Roberts, who drew the ire of MLB Players Association last week when he voiced his support for a salary cap and floor, reiterated Monday, December 8th, that it's merely his opinion and doesn't consider his view a potential distraction amongst players. Here's the thing, Roberts said. I'm entitled to an opinion, as we all are, and so I think that's one man's opinion, and unfortunately, I don't have a vote. I still think the game's in a great spot and everyone's winning. It's the greatest game, and it's not, and it's a lot of fun. So for me, I'm focused on 2026. But I was asked a question, and I answered it honestly. Roberts, who has led the Dodgers to back-to-back World Series titles, told Amazon Prime last week that he was in favor of a cap as long as there was a salary floor to force small market teams to also spend. You know what? I'm all right with a salary cap, Roberts said. I think the NBA has done a nice job of revenue sharing with the players and the owners. But if you're going to kind of suppress spending at the top, I think that you've got to raise the floor to make those bottom feeders spend money too. Roberts declined to back down from his comments, saying he simply wanted to provide his honest feelings. But again, my opinion shouldn't move the needle. So there's people that are going to have those conversations. But for me, I love where the game is at. I love the game of baseball. Again, I don't make these decisions. I coach a baseball team, and that's it. And if people don't like his opinion, to be honest, Roberts really doesn't care. I kind of stopped worrying about what people thought, Roberts said. I really did, because in our world, you can't win anyway. People are waiting for you to fall. That's the way it goes. They're waiting for controversy, right? He also scoffed at the notion that his opinion would create any problem with his players. With his players, union vehemently opposed to a salary cap. Each player knows how much I care about them, their well-being, Roberts said. So that would never, I'm not concerned with that at all. Meanwhile, with Shohei Ohtani declaring that he will play for Team Japan in the World Baseball Classic, Roberts said he would prefer that Ohtani doesn't pitch in the tournament, limiting himself to hitting. Yet, Roberts hasn't broached the topic with Ohtani. I'm hoping he doesn't pitch, Roberts said, but I don't know. Shohei, he's very in tune with his body, but I would say probably, the thought is he's probably just going to hit. Roberts also has not yet talked Dodgers pitchers Yoshinobu Yamamoto or Roki Sasaki. They are expected to pitch for Japan in the WBC, but neither has officially declared their intentions. Obviously, it's something that they are both excited about potentially, Roberts said. Obviously, the country of Japan is excited. We have to have that conversation, but I would like to think that it's going to be a dialogue as far as restrictions and pitching limitations. It's very delicate. I know I don't want to be dismissive of what it means to them representing their country. I know the organization doesn't, but I do think that the conversations need to be had, will be had as far as what each individual is taking on and whatever role that they might be taking on and what potential cost there might be. The Dodgers, after huge off-season expenditures the past several winters, were expected to be relatively quiet this time. They aren't permitted to publicly say they're not involved in the sweepstakes for high-profile fee agents like Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger, but are certainly hinting they won't dip into the deepest part of the free agent pool. But on Tuesday, December 9th, the Dodgers grabbed the best closer on the free agent market in Edwin Diaz. Diaz, who wanted to stay with the Mets but was demanding a 5-year deal, settled for a 3-year, $69 million contract from the Dodgers when the market dried up. Diaz's annual average salary of $23 million is the highest by a relief pitcher in history, and a team so powerful and talented that even with the salary cap, Roberts believes they could still remain perennial World Series contenders. Honestly, I think that we have an organization that whatever rule or regulations or constructs are put in front of us, Roberts said, we're going to dominate. And so give us the rules. And so just give us the rules. Let us know that the landscape, and then I'll bet on our organization. That's kind of the way I feel. How to fix the college football playoff and strengthen the sport at the same time. Matt Hayes, USA Today. They've been arguing about the new college football playoff format for nearly a year, bickering back and forth about a bunch of something that really means nothing. It's time for the Big Ten and the SEC to straighten out the college football postseason mess by simplifying it. Eat what you kill. No more automatic qualifiers. No more gifts to the 4 power conferences. No more excuse me entry for the group of 6. It's 16 teams with a selection committee of former coaches and media members, and every single invitation is based on merit, not on conference affiliation or charity. No more athletic directors on the selection committee with obvious biases and inherent investment in one program or another. No more random Janes or Joes off the street to give the committee and every man feel. I want people to know ball and media members keeping coaches from their inherent investment and understand the nuances of the game and aren't tied to some funky formula of not being able to vote on one team over another because the two teams were never in the same quartile to vote on. Or whatever the hell the current committee tried to sell about Notre Dame and Miami. Should Notre Dame be kicked off? You better believe it should. You can't be told one thing by the committee for 4 weeks, that head-to-head didn't matter, then be told the exact opposite on the final poll. That doesn't mean the Irish shouldn't have pulled a temper tantrum and walked away from the bowl season, but it certainly means we have to take a long look at how this thing works and how simply it can be fixed. No matter how Notre Dame and the Group of Six push for access, the current Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, for the new CFP contract beginning with the 2026 season gives Notre Dame automatic access if it is ranked in the top 12. And of course, automatic access for the highest rank Group of Six conference championship. It's an MOU. It's not legally set in stone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you the days of pandering to Notre Dame are over. Same with the Group of Six. There's a bit of a hiccup with the Group of Six because they may start talking about legal action and antitrust laws, but there's an easy way around it. Pay them off. Give them more cash from the new 16-team CFP format, which will earn significantly more money than the $1.4 billion annually it does now, and give them the same guarantee as everyone else. If you finish ranked in the top 16, you're in the CFP. If you don't, better luck next year. Remember this, everyone. The Big Ten and SEC have the ultimate trump card. If they don't like the way this thing is set up, they can walk away and have their own playoff. And there's nothing any enterprising attorney can do about it. Then, what does the Group of Six have? Bupkis. And Notre Dame, same deal. If you finish in the top 16, you're in the playoff. No more bending over for the university with its own television contract. For years, the Big Ten and SEC didn't want to rock the Notre Dame boat, just in case the Irish decided to join a conference. The two super conferences and the sport kept winking at Notre Dame and allowing this nonsensical, favorable entry into the Bowl Championship Series, CFP. Not anymore. The idea Notre Dame is a television draw certainly holds merit, but not nearly as much as it once did. Decades ago, Notre Dame dominated the television landscape and built a significant following because of it. Not every game, every single FBS game, is televised one way or another. It's a fall smorgasbord of football every Saturday and every other day except Sunday. Notre Dame isn't the draw it once was. The top 10 teams in viewership this season, according to Nielsen, were all SEC and Big Ten teams. Last year, when Notre Dame advanced to the CFP championship game and pocketed $20 million because of the sweet deal given to it by the CFP, its game against Ohio State drew 22.1 million viewers. It was one of the lowest viewership numbers in the history of PCS/CFP championship games. How low, you ask? The fifth least watched game of the BCS/CFP era. That's not narrative or Notre Dame hate. Those are facts. There's no reason to kowtow to Notre Dame other than the Big Ten and SEC hoping the Irish will come to the conference census and choose them. They won't. It would be fiscally reckless for Notre Dame to do so, and say nothing of its outright steadfast determination to remain an independent. And that's fine. Just like it's fine for the group of 6 to decide they'll take their chances and threaten legal action and not think the Big Ten and SEC will walk away from the entire process. You're not preventing Notre Dame and the group of 6 from playing in the CFP. They'll have the same access as everyone else. You want to expand the CFP beyond 16? Go ahead. Just don't change the foundation of the New Deal. Eat what you kill. College football playoff needs better actors to sell the charade. Blake Topmeyer, columnist, USA Today. Please send your application to join the next college football playoff selection committee to Grapevine, Texas. Good help needed. As final ballots were being counted for the Heisman Trophy as Notre Dame's grievances intensify, and as we all brace for first round blowouts, here are 3 lingering thoughts following conference championships weekend and CFP selection. Charade leaves bad taste. When the first CFP rankings came out November 4th, Notre Dame checked in at number 10, and Miami was at number 18. Those initial rankings came directly on the heels of Miami's loss to SMU and likely suffered from recency bias. Still, they came off obnoxiously ignorant of the reality that Miami and Notre Dame possessed identical records, and Miami owned a win against the Irish. In Notre Dame's 4 games since those initial rankings, the Irish outscored opponents that ranged in quality from bad to average by a combined score of 205 to 52. Their prize? The Irish dropped to number 11 in the final rankings. In Miami's 4 games since the initial rankings, the Hurricanes outscored opponents that ranged in quality from bad to average by combined scores of 151 to 41. Along the way, Miami catapulted from number 18 to number 10. See the issue? It's not that Miami finished 1 spot ahead of Notre Dame in the final rankings and seized the final at-large playoff bid. Miami getting the spot is appropriate, but the process came off as a sham. 1 month ago, the committee allegedly considered Notre Dame a markedly better team than Miami. All that happened since then is that each team blew out their remaining opponents. The committee sank Notre Dame in the rankings and kept moving up Miami as teams ahead of it lost. Admitting Miami and not Notre Dame is a just decision, but the process of reaching that decision became an unnecessary stunt that damaged the committee's credibility. That's not all. The committee ranked Alabama at number 10 on November 25th. In Alabama's 2 data points since that ranking, it held on for a white-knuckle road win against SUB minus .500 Auburn, and it got trampled by Georgia in the SEC championship game. The committee absorbed those 2 data points and moved the tide up from number 10 to number 9. I asked CFP Committee Chairman Hunter Yurachek to explain this. How, based on those 2 additional data points, would the committee justify moving Alabama up 1 spot to number 9 in the final 2 rankings? Yurachek explained the committee considered the Tide's performance and victory in the Iron Bowl a feather in their cap. If the CFP expects anyone to buy this charade, it needs better actors. Pick 12 best teams. The playoffs' current construction doesn't attempt to compile the 12 teams that could best contend for the national championship. If it did, Notre Dame would still be playing instead of complaining, and Texas would not be headed to the Citrus Bowl. Playoff rules insist 5 conference champions be invited. So the bracket includes Tulane and James Madison, a pair of teams that would be double-digit underdogs against either of the Irish and Longhorns. The CFP continues to be vastly inferior product to the regular season. Part of the reason is the playoff does not attempt to gather all the nation's best teams and pit them against one another. A first round that featured Texas, Oregon, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, A&M, and Miami, Oklahoma would strengthen the bracket and improve the product. With the playoff constructed as it is, college football's season crescendos in November. These first-round games in particular amount to a tremendous whimper. I'm against playoff ideas that would cheapen November, but I'm up to ideas that improve December. The brigade shouting, pick the 12 best teams, might have it right. That would still leave room for a group of 5 teams like the 2024 Boys State, which earned its way into a 12-team playoff under any framework. But it would prevent a situation where red-hot Notre Dame sits while Tulane gets a rematch with Ole Miss, a team it lost to by 35 points in September. Bowl Bonanza. Anyone care about bowl games anymore? Not Bohemians, apparently. As I always say, bowl game programming provides an outlet to avoid otherwise watching a Hallmark Christmas movie when trapped in the room with your odd uncle during the holidays. 5 bowl games, that'll gain my gaze as I tune to football instead of Lacey Chabert's latest holiday love story. BYU's versus Georgia Tech, Pop-Tarts, December 27th. Virginia versus Miami, Gator, December 27th. Tennessee versus Illinois, Music City, December 30th. Iowa versus Vanderbilt, ReliaQuest, December 31st. Michigan versus Texas, Citrus, December 31st. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 20 minutes after the hour. Mendoza and Pavia lead the Heisman field. Craig Meyer, USA Today. On Saturday, December 13, college football's most prestigious individual honor will be handed out, with the Heisman Trophy being awarded to the young man deemed to be the most outstanding player in sports. The 4 players vying for the famed 45-pound bronze trophy have been revealed. Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia, Ohio State quarterback Julian Sayin, and Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love are the finalists for the Heisman Trophy, with ESPN announcing the group on Monday, December 8th. Mendoza and Pavia are in line to make history for their respective programs, as neither Indiana nor Vanderbilt has produced a Heisman winner. 12 of the past 15 Heisman recipients have been quarterbacks, though only 3 of the past 5. Last season, Colorado wide receiver, cornerback Travis Hunter took home the award. Unlike Hunter, whose Buffalo's teams went 9-3 in the 2024 regular season, each of the Heisman finalists played on teams that won at least 10 games, including Mendoza and Sayin, whose squads earned first-round byes in the 12-team college football playoffs. Love had some history on his side. though. Since 1955, a running back or halfback has won the Heisman in every year that ends in a 5. A trend most recently saw Alabama running back and future NFL All-Pro Derrick Henry hoist the trophy. In what has become an increasingly transient sport over the past several years, 3 of the finalists are transfers. Mendoza is in his first season at Indiana after transferring from Cal. Pavia is in his second season at Vanderbilt after coming in from New Mexico State, and Sayan was an early enrollee at Alabama who spent about a month with the Crimson Tide before transferring to Ohio State shortly after coach Nick Saban's retirement in January 2024. Fernando Mendoza stats. In his first season with the Hoosiers, Mendoza has completed 71.5% of his passes for 2,980 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He has also rushed for 240 yards and 6 touchdowns. He led Indiana to a program record win with 13 wins, the Hoosiers' first Big Ten championship game victory, and the program's first undefeated regular season since 1945. Mendoza has only thrown for a combined 30 touchdowns in his first two college seasons, both of which came at Cal. Mendoza's 33 touchdown passes are the most among Football Bowl subdivision players. He is tied for second nationally with Pavia in yards per attempt, 9.4, and is sixth in completion percentage. Diego Pavia's stats. Pavia improved upon what was already a stellar debut season for Vanderbilt, completing 71.2% of his passes for 3,192 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He added 826 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. He's second among all FBS players in total yards per game, with 334.8, ranking him behind South Florida's quarterback Byram Brown. With Pavia at quarterback, the Commodores have gone 17-9 the past 2 seasons, including a 12-2 mark this season that set a program record for wins. Vanderbilt went 12-45 in the 4 seasons before Pavia transferred there. Julian Satan's stats. In his first season as a starter, Sayan has completed 78.4 of his passes for 3,332 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He's tied for second among all FBS quarterbacks in touchdown passes, behind only Mendoza, and his completion percentage is currently an FBS single-season record. Jeremiah Love stats. Love rushed for 1,372 yards and 18 touchdowns and averaged 6.9 yards per carry. Love had been a receiving threat out of the backfield too, with 27 catches for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. His third among FBS players is rushing touchdowns and fourth in rushing yards. Women's National Basketball Association superstar Wilson named Time's 2025 athlete. Megan L. Hall. Las Vegas Aces superstar A'ja Wilson is Time's Athlete of the Year because, of course, she is. The 6'4" South Carolina native earned her second WNBA scoring title, third Defensive Player of the Year, and awarded 4th MVP, the first in league's history to accomplish the feat, weeks before winning her 3rd championship. The now 2-time Finals MVP, and the Aces swept the Phoenix Mercury in the WNBA Finals. Wilson is the first player in WNBA or NBA history to win a championship, Finals MVP, regular season MVP, and DPOY award in the same season. She's also one of the 4 players in the WNBA or NBA to win 4 MVP trophies before the age of 30. Fittingly, Wilson wore a Thanos-inspired glove to Las Vegas's championship parade this year to celebrate. When you're collecting everything, that's Thanos, Wilson told Time. And this year, I collected everything. I don't really talk much. Crap. I kind of let my game do it. This was my biggest moment of doing it, because no one's ever done what I've done, and I think people really needed to understand that. Wilson was part of several Time honorees for 2025, including K-pop Demon Hunters as the 2025 Breakthrough of the Year, YouTube's Neil Mohan as the CEO of the Year, and Leonardo DiCaprio as the Entertainer of the Year. Her ascension to the greatest year in her career did not come without some struggles. At the midway point of the WNBA season, the Aces were sitting at .500 and were on the receiving end of a 50-plus blowout loss to the Minnesota Lynx. Then a switch flipped. Las Vegas rattled off 16 straight wins to get to the postseason and endured back-to-back playoff series that required the team to play every game possible, 3 against the Seattle Storm and 5 against the Indiana Fever, before getting to the finals. Sometimes you've just got to get knocked down to get built back up, Wilson said. I think 2025 was a wake-up call that I needed to let me know that I can't be satisfied with anything. There's somebody out there that's going to try to take your job. You need to make sure you're great at it every single day. Wilson further cemented her legacy and perhaps her Time Athlete of the Year award when she hit a game-winning shot against the Mercury during Game 3 of the WNBA Finals. The shot, released with a fitting 2.2 seconds left on the clock, a subtle ode to her number 22 jersey, cemented the series for the Aces and catapulted Wilson into her conversations for the WNBA's greatest player of all time. Since the Women's National Basketball Association star wouldn't quite put herself in that category just yet. That said, she believes that she's making it hard for people to chase after her. When you think about a lot of GOATs, greatest of all times, they have those career-defining shots that solidify you as the best, she said. I didn't really have one of those. I had championships, yeah, but it was never really like a moment of like, woo! That's why she is who she is. She's exactly who she thinks she is. Florida State stuns in 5th national title. Liam Rooney, USA Today. Rihanna Hudson was the hero again for Florida State soccer as her 87th minute goal handed the Seminoles a 5th national title and second in 3 seasons, with a 10-1 win over Stanford on Monday, December 8th at CPKC Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri. Hudson scored the winner for the Seminoles in the semifinal against TCU to book a spot in the national title game, and it was her right-footed shot paired with true freshman goalkeeper Kate O'Kane who led FSU to the national title. Hudson was named the College Cup's most outstanding offensive player, while O'Kane was named most outstanding defensive player for her performances over the 2 games. Congratulations to our players. Amazing performance, amazing grit, toughness to beat a very good Stanford team. FSU head coach Brian Penske told reporters post-game. In tough games like this, you need a goalkeeper to keep you in the game, and we had a goalkeeper keep us in the game. And then you need to find a way to pull a ball in the back of the net, and obviously Rihanna did that. Just so elated for our team, the toughness and resilience that grew in this group over the course of the fall. Their elation says it all. Very, very happy right now. Okenye made a career-high 9 saves, keeping the nation's best offensive in Stanford scoreless with an heroic effort. Shots from close range or distance, it didn't matter as Okenye matched everything the Cardinals sent her way. She's a little animal, Penske said on the ESPNU broadcast. She's the MVP of this match. She kept us in this match. That's what's great. That's what great goalkeepers have to do. It was definitely a tough game, and Stanford is a phenomenal team. I think what kept us calm is just all of us being together, and that communications on the field meant so much to everyone, Okenye added post-game. Even though we didn't have all the possessions the whole game, we still came out on top because we were together. With the shots, just staying calm really helped, and believing in my team. Stanford forced Okenye to make 6 saves in the first half as the Cardinal outshot the Seminoles 11-4 in the opening period and controlled the flow of the game. She had to make a pair of spectacular saves, one on a point-blank header off a Stanford corner kick, and another that forced the freshman to quickly dive down to her left and push a volleyed shot from the Stanford's Charlotte Kohler wide. A tactical change in the first half helped FSU stop some of the Stanford momentum. The Seminoles have played a 4-4-2 throughout the NCAA tournament, but switched to a 4-2-3-1 in the first half to overload the midfield and force the Cardinals into wide spaces. That change allowed FSU a few chances to counterattack. However, the Seminoles couldn't convert, despite some good opportunities for Jordan Dudley. The second half, much like the first, saw the Cardinals test Okenye in net with 7 shots in the half. But the freshman player continued to save whatever Stanford threw her way, which allowed Hudson the opportunity to find the winner. Taylor Suarez played a low cross in the box in the 87th minute, and her ball was deflected into space by Stanford's Elise Evans. Hudson was the first to react, and she smashed the ball into the net with her right foot, a golden strike to give the Seminoles a 5th national title, the second most in NCAA women's soccer history. I'm so glad that we got the outcome because we really went through it during this time, Hudson told the ESPNU broadcast. I am so glad we got this. Stuart Scott Film celebrates the TV personality and pioneer. Scott Axon, USA Today. How can you tell a story in 77 minutes about someone who meant so much to so many people? Maybe a better question is, how strong is perseverance when faced with insurmountable odds in both work and life? Filmmaker Andre Gaines, the one and only Dick Gregory, the Dutchman, faced that dilemma head-on when trying to answer those questions and many more while telling the story of the beloved sportscaster Stuart Scott. Scott is the subject of ESPN's latest 30 for 30 film, Boo-Ha, a Stuart Scott portrait, which will premiere on Wednesday, December 10th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN and the ESPN app and Disney Plus. It's a triumphant story, but also a tragic one. Gaines, who also produced the film, told USA Today Sports. Hopefully, we will celebrate his life as opposed to linger on his death. For his part, Gaines does a more than admirable job blending storytelling that allows the subject to tell the story without being heavy-handed in its message, using never-before-seen footage and Scott's own self-shot home videos. Scott, who died at the age of 49 in 2015 after a more than 7-year battle with appendix cancer, revolutionized sports broadcasting with the distinctive style that he created, cultivated, and ultimately perfected while challenging the public, especially those who didn't look like him, to accept it. Let's face it, ESPN and its studio shows were a by-the-numbers production, and although they were popular because there was nothing else like it on cable television, they certainly had no semblance of style until Scott arrived in 1993 at the start of ESPN2. Scott realized that hip-hop was a major force in mainstream America and inserted catchphrases like, "cool as the other side of a pillow," or "Michael Jordan was like butter because he's on a roll." That is some culture-changing stuff, and it is still being talked about today in the age of everyone's trying to become viral just because, not necessarily because they had talent like Scott. Those who experienced it felt the brilliance and ease with which someone can be unapologetically true to themselves while doing their job with excellence and touching many lives, whether others chose to follow in their footsteps or not. Those who didn't get it, and still don't, were a vocal minority, especially people who wasted their time sending Scott racist letters and phone messages, including one Scott played in one of his home videos to drive home his point. That is a significant theme in the film, as Scott received constant blowback for his style from outsiders and even some inside the Bristol headquarters, despite ESPN's hiring him for that very reason, because he was different. Gaines said he didn't name names and pick on those executives or anyone else who complained about Scott's unique style. If there is one slight grumble about the film, that's it. In a documentary format, or anything that is based on someone's lives, all sides need to be picked apart. In the science of truth-telling, sometimes feelings get hurt, or not so flattering reminders of unacceptable or even racist behavior and speech come to light. And that's okay. Gaines began the project nearly 2 years ago, interviewed 50 people, and said he had enough footage for a 4 to 5 part series. Scott's story begins in Chicago and North Carolina, and he never intended to become a sportscaster. Originally, Scott wanted to be a football player, but he was diagnosed with keratoconus in high school, a rare eye disease that would affect him for the rest of his life. That eye issue became more complicated when he was preparing a story about the New York Jets training camp. All the while, his true hope was that he could actually make the team. While catching footballs from a jug machine, one hit him in the eye where he had good vision, setting off a chain of events that included him barely being able to see while doing his job. The film really takes off when Scott's former colleagues, including Chris Berman, Rich Eisman, Robin Roberts, athletes like Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal and his loved ones, especially his daughters, Taylor and Sydney, who showed incredible grace throughout, are interviewed. These interviews provide more insight into a man whose work ethic was unmatched, but that trait, combined with long work-related absences, ultimately led to the end of his marriage. The film's last 25 minutes are not for the weary. Gaines warns viewers to have their tissues handy, detailing Scott's final years from his courageous fight with cancer to his last epic appearances before the 2014 ESPY Awards, where he poignantly said, "You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and the manner in which you live." There is a montage of photos near the film's conclusion featuring Scott, including some from the last few weeks of his life, set to Donny Hathaway's A Song for You, that are incredibly heartbreaking, but also highlight the remarkable life of a man who left us too soon, and most important, left a big, more significant mark. The film's strength in allowing the viewers to determine what that is and how it applies to them can't be understated. There is no doubt, amid the constant debate, sports morning shows, and podcasts from athletes and celebrities alike, Scott paved the way for them to monetize their brands through mass consumption platforms, for better or worse. With Stewart, what's interesting is that he was able to maintain that position in his personality for the times to catch up with him, Gaines said. Thankfully, in his short life, he was able to enjoy some of the spoils of that. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 43 minutes after the hour. Super Bowl champions in danger of a late collapse. Inglewood, California. Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith sat quietly next to each other in a somber post-game locker room after a 22-19 overtime loss on Monday Night Football to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Philadelphia Eagles hardly resemble the team that won Super Bowl 59 just 10 months ago. A third consecutive loss dropped Philadelphia to 8-5. We have won a lot of football games. Right now, we've lost 3 in a row, Eagles coach Nick Sirianni said. I'm confident in the coaches that we have, the players that we have, the owner that we have, the front office that we have. We're built to overcome, and we know how to do that. Sirianni confirmed reports that he had taken more of a hands-on approach with the Eagles' offense in preparation for the game December 8th. Saquon Barkley did top 100 rushing yards for the second time this season, but the offense was once again mostly lethargic. It's tough to glean confidence from this version of the Eagles' offense. The Eagles haven't scored more than 21 points in a game since October. Philadelphia came into Week 14 with the 23rd ranking passing attack and 22nd ranked rushing offense in the league. Hurts tossed a career worst 4 interceptions versus the Chargers and produced a nightmare 5 total turnovers in the overtime defeat. I have to find ways to lead our team to victories, Hurts said. That's not something that's foreign to us. We are just not able to do it at the moment. That starts with me and how I play, how I lead, and how I go out there and do my job. When I look at it at any point, it's about how I respond to a test and what level of resilience and resolve I have to push forward and figure things out. The Eagles are slightly in front of the Dallas Cowboys, 6-1, for the NFC East lead with 4 regular season games remaining. The Eagles' 3-game losing streak is reminiscent of the team's 2023 collapse, during which they lost 5 of their last 6 regular season games and made a quick exit in the postseason. Yet the silver lining is this Eagles club, despite some injuries, brought back 10 offensive starters from the Super Bowl winning squad. Standout tackle Lane Johnson is expected to return this season. 3 of their next 4 opponents have losing records. They control their own destiny. You'll always have to look inward and be honest with yourself first and foremost. Take accountability and learn to fix it as quickly as possible. Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown said, "That's what we plan to do. That's what I plan to do." Brown is correct. The Eagles' offense must quickly find a way to turn things around, or else the season will expire quickly, akin to the 2023 squad. A game like that definitely stings. But we can use this to either start pointing fingers and get upset, or we can make sure that doesn't break us and we come together and we just keep rolling. And I think we're going to take that side of it, Barkley said. Everything that we want is still in front of us. That's the beauty of football. That's the beauty of having success early in the season. And now we got to get things rolling. USA Today Life. Fight nights. The hostile battle for Warner Brothers is bad for consumers. Kelly Lawler, USA Today. The fight for the future of Warner Brothers is getting ugly. The losers will be the people who love TV and movies. Paramount Skydance announced on December 8th that it has launched a hostile bid to buy all of Warner Brothers Discovery, taking its offer directly to the corporation shareholders in an attempt to fend off the deal for Netflix to buy Warner Brothers, just the movie studio, streaming service HBO Max, and HBO, with the plan to spin off the company's cable networks. That was announced on December 5th. Netflix bid marked them the winner of the months-long war for Warner that included Paramount and Comcast, much to Paramount's chagrin. The mergers and acquisition drama started when Paramount offered to buy WPD unsolicited back in September, which prompted a formal sale process that ultimately left Paramount the loser. But they aren't going quietly, and they weren't the only ones with concerns. Since the December 5 announcement that Netflix would buy Warner, there has been an uproar from Hollywood, the business community, and Washington. Any merger like this requires regulatory approval. Paramount feels slightly slighted in the sale process. Hollywood unions, producers, and analysts worry about the death of the theater goer and the loss of power for filmmakers and creators. President Donald Trump, a good friend of Paramount CEO David Ellingson, said the merger could be a problem because of antitrust regulations. But even as bigwigs from government, media, and Wall Street argue and fight over the future of one of the most storied movie studios to ever come out of Hollywood, one thing is clear: the rest of us are probably going to be the losers in this dogfight. Whether Netflix ends up with Warner Brothers or Paramount ends up with all of Warner Brothers, Discovery, or something else entirely transpires, the result for consumers who love watching movies and TV will be the same: less choice, higher prices, and fewer artists experimenting and making great work to surpass and delight us. We've already seen what happens as these huge mergers go through in the film and TV industry, and it's not pretty. In 2019, Disney purchased 21st Century Fox, and while comic book fans delighted in the new Fantastic Four movie and the ability of more of their favorite characters to appear together, thousands of jobs quietly were lost and creative content was shelved. Disney laid off workers, shut down Fox 2000 Picture Studio, canceled or paused movie productions to focus on juggernauts such as the Avatar sequels, and started rebooting Fox titles such as Cheaper by the Dozen, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, into overwhelming Disney Plus releases with bigger market shares of box office films. The bigger company could negotiate for a higher portion of theater ticket sales against weaker movie theaters. And that was far from the only major Hollywood merger of the past decade. In 2021, Amazon bought MGM Studios and later control of the James Bond franchise. In 2022, only 3.5 years ago, Warner Brothers itself merged with Discovery Networks to create Warner Brothers Discovery. Canceled nearly completed films such as Batgirl and Coyote vs. Acme pulled titles from its HBO Max streaming service, including Westworld, and combined its highbrow legacy content with lowbrow reality, food, and home improvement TV. The sad reality is the continued consolidation of Hollywood is focused on value for shareholders. With less competition, prices often eventually rise. In this case, your monthly streaming service bill. With fewer studios greenlighting films and TV shows, budding young artists have fewer places to pitch their next great ideas, and the pipeline of content becomes more uniform. Each Warner Brothers buyer comes with the downside. Netflix might slowly chip away at the business of seeing movies in the theater. A company with close ties to the Trump administration said as Paramount might be inclined to stifle political dissent by filmmakers and journalism on WBD's CNN, or even come Indian John Oliver on HBO. Oh, and even comedian John Oliver on HBO. These megacorporations will argue it's a matter of merge or die. You don't want to be the number 4, 5, 6 player in the industry. You really need to be 1, 2, or 3, says Derek Riesfeld, founder of MarketWatch. Being numbers 4, 5, or 6 will not be much fun. You're an also-ran. There's a war happening for your eyeballs. For the limited time and attention you have to give after a long day of work, of taking care of kids, or going to the doctor and the bank and getting that leak in your house fixed. The best art, from such blockbusters as Superman to tiny HBO shows such as Somebody Somewhere, can genuinely improve our lives and bring us joy and relief. That's why we tune in at all. But the best movie and TV shows aren't made under the strain and watchful eye of executives and Wall Street investors. In essence, art and commerce are not natural bedfellows. For a century or so, Hollywood has balanced those two precipitously. In our modern era of consolidation, the balance might finally tip in the wrong direction. Sphere plays to Zac Brown's band's heart and soul. Melissa Ruggiero, USA Today. Las Vegas. The beauty of the Sphere in its ability to transform. Every act with a residency at the dynamic Las Vegas venue, from U2's stunning 2023 run that opened the arena to the Backstreet Boys' current slick pop fest, has molded the Sphere's unparalleled technology to suit both its music and personality. The Zac Brown Band, which kicked off its 8-date Sphere run December 5th, tweaked the foundation yet again by creating a musical journey laced with captivating visuals that complemented Brown's lyrical storytelling. The biggest surprise of prepping for the Sphere is realizing your only limitations is your imagination, Brown tells USA Today. This is the most ambitious show we've ever attempted, but it's the perfect canvas for our music. We're most excited to share how these songs feel when the entire room is part of the mood. The fans don't just watch the show, they're in a show with us. The 9-piece band's specialized production is named for their just-released 8th studio album, Love and Fear. While the 140-minute show drew evenly from ZBB's ample 20-year catalog, starting with the growling hard rocker Heavy as the Head, with Brown donning a crown and flexing sculpted biceps, several new songs were peppered throughout. New songs? What new songs does the band play in the Sphere show? The finger-snapping Hard Run, the pinpoint harmonizing and wicked guitar soloing in Animal, and the strolling of I Ain't Worried About It, which shares a bloodline with Stephen Bishop's 1997 soft rock hit, On and On, all received their debut graphics of crumbling canyons and seat-viving heptics. On and On all received their live debut, graphics of crumbling canyons and seat-vibrating haptics connected to the visuals, schools of fish that felt large enough to swallow the arena, dancing skeletons and cracked glaciers embedded with the band's faces enveloped the room. What a night, Brown in his wide-rimmed hat marveled, one of several times he was noticeably in his feelings by the scope of his surroundings. I can't believe it's finally here. The show is presented loosely in 3 parts, all connected to Brown's pre-taped thoughts about fatherhood, prefacing the tender, my old man, exercising emotional demons, being a better person, and expressing gratitude toward military families. Tonight is my love letter to you. Even though I gave you my all, tonight I give you my everything, Brown said in a voiceover at the start of the show. The thought and care are apparent, though sometimes Brown's ruminating, as when he came on stage in a fur coat and hat to talk about lessons learned from someone in Alaska before delving into colder weather, seemed to prompt relentlessness from the sold-out crowd. While the Zac Brown Band has been synonymous with country music, Brown always has ensured that the band was never pigeonholed. He often made bold detours into rock and electronica, and that multitude of musical inspirations impresses even more in a live setting. The Zac Brown Band dipped into their soul leanings on Loving You Easy, as shots of the band in Glinda-esque bubbles floated around the 160,000 square foot screen, turned poignant on the pretty piano ballad Butterfly, and roared on Let It Run, a new track about the joys of lighting up the features Snoop Dogg on record.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,